Okay, so we've got here the section that you've been provided with, which is not at a great resolution, but you can still see enough detail to work out the basic layout of those joists, which have herringbone struts. And sorry? Yeah, if you want to, yeah. So, yep. Sorry, it's just jumping pages. I shouldn't have clicked OK to that image, to that little dialog box, but it's just going to make things run faster and hopefully look better. Okay, so just going to rotate that back again. Oh, now it's crashed. Brilliant. Okay. Okay, so again, just looking at that section, the other main feature is the columns and the beams. So the columns and the beams support those joists, and so we need to add those elements to the section before really then proceeding to the reflective ceiling plan. So I might even do the joist in the reflective ceiling plan though before maybe completing them on the section, but definitely want to put in the columns and the beams before going too far with those things. And so the joists, I think, are not specified here. So by eye they look like they're about 200 or maybe 250 by 50. I'll just see on one of the other drawings if they're noted. Has anyone seen if there's a note for the joist size on any of the drawings? So it just says joist at 450 centres, but I couldn't see a note on the size anywhere. So again, we can just assume they're 200 by 50, I think. And then you have the floor lining, so the floorboards above that, and so then working down from the floor level that we're using as a baseline, can assume, well, let's just make it a round number, 20 mil for the floor thickness. So I'm just going to offset 20 mil from that line there. And then again offset 200 this time for the floor joists, and we can see there that's really not maybe enough, because that leaves, let's just measure that distance, .345. They're looking more even than that, so maybe let's make it instead 250 joist. So I'll offset another 50 mil from that line. Split the original, so I've got there a gap, and that looks more like the the section. And so then we've got the beams underneath. And so now going back to the floor plan, I'm going to make a layer for the columns when they're, sorry, the beams when they're cut, but actually we'll do that later. So we've got the structural columns layout, which you can use for the columns in elevation as well. So I'm just going to draw from the columns that we've already got, and actually while I'm at that, can check the orientation. Yeah, I think that's okay. Oops, so we've got it right when we place them. And so again, just projecting lines from each edge that you'll see on the column. So you could even go as far as drawing the inner lines. And so notice I'm just making it perpendicular to the bottom edge of the beam for now. It will continue through to the joists. I'll have to look at the connection before working that out properly. And there may even be another beam that projects across from here that isn't shown in the plan. Yeah, so there is. So we've got a beam here that comes towards us that we'll need to show in section as well, and that can be added to the plan later as well. So again, just by, so someone just copy that line across, so that's drawing it again. Okay, so looking more closely at that drawing and then the photos as well. You can see these are actually different, so so it really doesn't need to be perfect as long as you draw some sort of support there. It's not actually bracing is what I was going to say, but it's so I forget the structural terms sometimes. So there are terms for all of these different steel structural elements. But as long as you make an attempt at drawing them, so I'm just trying to get a good image. You can see it in all of these images, that bracing section could be called a frog. And there we go, that's a great image of it. So you can see you've got the angle, steel angle, and then the bracing. Yeah. Right, so we can just assume a size for that. So I'm going to say it's maybe 100 by 250 or something. Maybe, yeah. Well, if that's 3, yeah. So maybe 100 by 150 even or something. 150 by 80 maybe, even something like that. We'll see how it looks. So we'll do. Yeah, yeah. So I think the section could be wrong there, because here they look more like 200s, but yeah, we can just leave them at I've drawn them. So look, I'll just keep it, maybe make the numbers round numbers, so make it 100 by 200. That keeps it simple. And so here you can see the thickness of the UB. And I'm just going to keep that. So I don't remember what it was, 15 mil. So I'm just going to offset 15 for each of those lines, and then offset 100, and then 200, and then using fillet you can join all those lines together. And then trim. So all those layers can just go onto the structural columns layer, and then a diagonal would be plenty. So you could, if you really want to, make a block for that little part, but I'm going to make a block for the whole column, and that should be enough, I think. So I've got one side drawn, and then the other side would just be the same. So a good trick there is to draw a line between the two sides of the column. So I'm just using the inner edge there to keep it simple. So I've drawn a line there, which should give me a midpoint in the middle of the column. Exactly. So I'm just selecting left to right. That's a window selection, which will only select the things inside. And then with mirror, I can snap to the midpoint of that line I've just drawn, take it down and make sure it's a vertical line. Enter to keep the original.
And then so you're going to make a block for that whole thing so you can just repeat it.
Exactly. Exactly, yeah. So I might move that line down just to remind me that it's there, and it could come in handy when I need to mirror other things, but I'll delete it in the end. And then, so we've got the plinth, the support of the, or the footing of the column there, which we don't see in that photo, so I'll just finish off with this block piece that is obviously different to the one you can see there. So we've got just a rectangular piece that sits over the face, and I think even though it does probably project out, we can just say it's flush with the column when drawing it. So I'm just going to measure so I can see roughly what the size. So yeah, about 160, I think, maybe even 160 or so. So I'm going to offset 160 from the bottom of the beam down, and then what else do we see? So that's, we're going to see the plate that sits under the beam. So we've got a beam coming towards us that we're going to see, and it's a good chance to draw a UV profile. UV. So this is a UC. The column is a universal column profile. So I've drawn that in plan. Exactly. So I'm going to copy up that profile, since it's the same, just with different dimensions. So I've copied it up so that it's going to sit right above, and then using rotate, I can snap to the insertion base point. So just moving the cursor around, notice how it's trying to give me the midpoint. It's going to give me the insertion if I move around enough, but a good trick there is to type INS, enter, and then hover over the block, and it'll always snap to the insertion point. And now I'm just going to make sure it's rotated so that it's vertical, and then can explode it. So if I select it, the really important thing to know about blocks is that you can always explode them. So the explode button you have there on the ribbon.
Does that mean just that block?
Yeah, just that block, exactly, yeah. And so now if I stretch, this time I'm going to select right to left, which is a crossing window. Enter, and then snap to the top and bring it up to the underside of the, the joist. But remember, it's also narrower than the column. So good to use a bit of judgment here and decide how much narrower it is. So, well, that may be wider than I have drawn it, but I'll just check that measurement. So I've drawn it 250 across. So just to get it visually to read as being the same as what you're seeing in the photo there, let's say it is, well, let's say 180, because it would be more than 150, more like 200 probably, but let's say 180. Okay, so I've got this line again, which will be useful now. So I'm going to draw a line, snapping to that midpoint again, which gives me again a centre line, which will be really useful, because because then I can offset either side of that 90 mil. So all this should be good practice using a lot of these other editing commands, because I'm going to use stretch again now. So right to left, and I'm selecting the ends of the beam that I want to bring across, but I don't want the column edges to move across. So I'm going to hold down Shift and simply click onto those lines to deselect them. Enter, and then I can snap to the corner, bring it across, and then the same on the other side. So always right to left when you're selecting with a stretch command. Has to be a crossing window. And there we go. So now I can delete these lines, and I'm left with the beam the right size. And then finishing off that base plate. So we've got this basically rectangular shape, which again I'm just going to have following the edges of the column. So I'll take that onto the column layer and trim using that line and then the two sides of the column. Just trim all that back. So that's the plate. I don't need this line anymore because I've got this one I can use now. And then the plate that it sits on is a little wider than the beam. So I'll say that's, we know the beam's 180. And actually while I'm at it, I'll put that beam onto the beam, well sorry, no, I was going to put it onto the beam layer, but we need a new layer for that. Okay, so here, this previous beam layer has been used for beam lines in projection, but this will be cut. So when you're labelling your layers, you don't have to always label them as either projection or cut. Usually the one that you make second is the one that you'll label. So here, structural beam cut. Is my new layer, which needs to have a heavier line weight, and beams and structural elements should read heavier than other things. So 0.35 or even 0.4. 0.4 is going to be fairly heavy to look at, so I might make it 0.35 for now. We can always make it a bit heavier later. At least 0.35. And then just to keep the colours as consistent with the other structural elements, I might just keep the same colour. Remember, my practice with colours is a bit different to a lot of other people. A lot of other people follow a standard. Yeah. Yeah, because the colours represent line weights. Yeah. But I just don't find the need for that anymore, because you can turn the line weights on the screen. So I find it easier to break up the colours further to give you a better idea which layers are being used. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And every office uses a different standard. Yeah. There is no standard for that anymore. It's not even part of the international standards for layers. So the colours are really just to help you. So if you work out your own system and follow that, no one's going to mind. As long as you know, when you're working in an office, make sure you learn their standard, because they'll all have one. So now I can put the beam onto the new beam layer, and notice how straight away it reads as heavier because I have my line weights turned on the screen. Notice as well that this line is heavy as well because it's on the floor layer, and so we'll need to have a joist layer for that. And so that could be either part of the structural category or the floor, but I think I'll just keep it as part of the structure. So joists, and well, we're going to have joists cut and in projection, so may as well do both. at the same time. So the cut, I'll leave at 0.35, and then the other one just at maybe 0.25 for now. And if you're wondering why I'm just debating a bit about the line weights to use, because they do vary depending on your scale. There's no fixed setting for line weights, because at scales like 1 to 5, 1 to 10, you'll have overall much heavier line weights than at say 1 to 200. So you've got to use your judgment. But just follow the basic principle of light, medium and heavy and decide that way. So this is medium essentially. And so then the colours, generally timber is yellow, and that's if there is any standard I follow with the colours, it is based on the material colours that are in the Australian standard. So yellowish colour is always good for timber, well I think anyway. So this now, now what's going on there? That's gone. Did I change? I changed my beam layer to the. That's wrong. So what did I do there? That should be still 161, and this one should be 50. Oh, that's right. So the other one. Okay, so then this can go onto the joist layer, and it's got a light line weight again, which is what we want. So then the again the plate underneath the beam is the final thing there. So you can barely see it there, but it is I think drawn there, and definitely in the photo you can see it. So I'll just say it's 15mm plate and 200mm wide. So I'll set to 15. And then again to get, in this case we can just offset from the beam because we know the beam's 180. So if we come out 10mm either end, and all of that could just be on the beams layer. So I'm just stretching these lines manually, or I could even use move. So I know it might seem like a lot of detail to draw in, but when you do your details, you need to do some details for the later projects. You'll have it all set up for you, ready to go. So that's it. Oh, no, sorry, that shouldn't be cut either. So that can go onto the projection layer. So there we are. And then we've got the bottom. Okay, so you can see you've got these concrete footings which project from the floor. And again, got to use a bit of judgment there to work out the height, but we'll say 150, I think. So it wouldn't hurt to draw that in plan first, just to get a baseline for the size. Well, I'll show you a trick here. So with the rectangle tool, it's difficult to draw from the centre, so you can always just draw it from the corner or even draw it out in space. So I'm just going to decide on a size, and I don't know, what do you think it's... We know the column's 180? Oh no, sorry, it's not, it's more than that, I've forgotten what it is. So 250, yeah, you're right. So, okay, so it's 250 across, and that looks like it's about 3 times the size, so we could say 750 by 350, you right? So if it's square, yeah, so maybe that's right. So I'll just draw the rectangle off to the side. Okay, so 750 across, comma 350 vertically, and we don't have a layer for concrete either, so that's another one to make. So a structural concrete, and yeah, we can make a new one for the cut. So concrete, the colour for concrete? Green. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's just the Australian standard colour. So, oh yeah, so just while we're at it, I'll just show you there in the Australian standards. I think I've given you the architectural. So I'll double check, I forget these sometimes, there are a few to remember. Here we are, so, oh no, that's not it. Yeah, yeah, and so, here we go, representation of materials, there we are. So concrete, here we go. So any of those greens. Structural concrete. So it doesn't have to be standard green. Down the bottom, if you've got standard colours in AutoCAD, it can be any of these other greens. It's up to you, really. And again, it's in projection, so not a heavy line weight, definitely. So either medium or light, but again, because it's structural, I'll keep it as medium. And just move it onto that layer. Okay, so now's the trick to snap this so that it's centered on the beam. A really good trick you can use in AutoCAD is to use the move command. I've just selected it and now I'm going to click move. And then notice I've just hovered over the midpoint on the top and then the midpoint on the side. And because I have object snap tracking turned on, and if you're not sure where that is, it's down the bottom. It should be turned on by default these days. So you need object snap to be on. And then you'll see next to that, oh, they've hidden the option. It's one of the, oh no, so it is there. Why can't I see the button? Oh, the button's not coming up there. Definitely is on. Oh no, sorry, they've called it Show Snapping Reference Line. That is the button next to Object Snap. And that's Object Snap Tracking. That again, they've given it, as always, to make things confusing, a new name, Show Snapping Reference Lines, which I suppose makes more sense. It's more descriptive. But anyhow, it's still also called Object Snap Tracking. And that gives you those little blips. So notice how, because I hovered over those midpoints, the blips are still there to tell me, or those markers to tell me which point it's tracking, and I can then line up the centre by aligning those two tracking lines. And that's really the only way you can snap to the centre of something like a rectangle which doesn't have a point to snap to. And then again here to snap to the centre of the column, because it's a block, INS, enter, I can snap that way. So that's a useful thing to have in plan, and you can probably assume that the other columns have the same thing, and you could just copy it to each of those. But I'll do that afterwards.
So if you were doing the fit-out or,
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Just above.
Yes.
So what you should, with columns of that size, you should always assume that they've got some kind of concrete.
Not always, no. They'll always have a footing, but it might not be raised from the main floor. So normally when people talk about a floor, they mean the structural floor, and then you have floors that are just finishes above that sometimes. And so that's one option, to add a new finished floor that's raised, yep. And you'd need to put a new floor structure in to support that as well. So you just have floor joists or battens that would raise it up. And if you're going to do a timber floor, that's one way. But another option is to just leave it and seal the concrete, which is a pretty reasonable finish, and leave the projections and work around them, which these days is fairly common with the more industrial sort of fit outs you see a lot. So yeah. It would be, but you know, people can get around it as well, as long as you just plan the rest of the design around it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's right. But I mean, I know some pretty decent cafes. There's one up in North Newtown that's probably the best quality cafe. It's almost fine dining up in near the street that's Stecky's, if you know. That's right. Yeah, there. Yeah, Brewtown. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So they've got the old industrial floor there, and I'd say they would if there are any things projecting. Yeah, well, upstairs is timber, I think, but the bottom level is definitely concrete. I'm not sure if they've got any projecting things, but if there were any, they would have just left them. And so it's always an option. But anyhow, something to think about. It's an easy thing though. If you want to add a new floor in, wouldn't be a bad idea especially if you want timber, to just put a new floor in. If you want to do a nicer thing. Yeah, well, that's where things get a bit hairy. You could do that, but you think, what's the point when? I mean, look, concrete I know is fairly popular in some situations. So yeah, I suppose you could do that. It's a lot of if you're just doing a fit out though, normally you don't want to be that intrusive, and yeah, I'd really think twice before doing that. So there are. No, I was going to say there are ways of faking it, but it's not even worth doing those. Yeah.
And is that concrete? Is that just holding it there? Is it just like sticking it in place? This is obviously not the right terminology, or is that involved in there? And
oh yeah, that is part of the structure. Yeah, that's the footing for the column. So yeah, so you can't change that at all. Yeah. So again, I can just draw lines from this though up to the section and offset. So I say 150 from the floor slab, and now that I've got a well, I don't have a concrete cut layer, so I should do that too. And this can all go onto that layer because the floor is concrete, so it should go onto that layer. And so the layer that I made before and called simply floor will become the floorboards in the end. So now though, with fillet, just join those together, get this onto the same layer. Trim, and I may as well trim the columns now that I know where it finishes, and then that line I can use mirror to flip using the centre line of the column. So there we are, nice beam, column I mean, with the beam. So the beam should be made into a block on its own. So don't be afraid to make blocks, it's so easy. Once you select the objects and type B, enter, and you just got to force yourself to remember to pick a base point every time. And in this case it would make sense to have the top or the bottom as your base point instead of the centre, so you could just snap to the midpoint. I think on the base there would be as good as anything, and convert to block so it doesn't remove the one that's already in the right place. Don't turn this option off, it's terrible when you can't explode blocks. That's it, so okay, and a name so it reminds you, and so we'll call this beam, yeah, maybe UB, and the sorry, what do they call the other one? So we'll just call it UB without beam, because UB means universal beam. And then the size, I've forgotten completely, 180 across, and then, yeah, we'll say 180 by 300. Just trying to follow the same convention as the other one, so yeah. So it's actually 295, but close enough to 300. That's fine. And then another one for the column. So again, just selecting that and making sure I don't have anything else. And again, so B, enter, and so it's UC. Might as well put the size in. Well, you could, but we've got the in the upper levels. They're going to be different. Yeah. So the column size. So here we go, 250, and this is an elevation. And again, always remember to give a base point. And so here maybe the midpoint on the plan. So again, I'm just using object tracking to snap that to the floor line. Convert to block, of course. Okay. And so if we see these other beams, has John told you whether you need to keep any walls? Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Basically, if you muck around or remove anything, be aware that you'll need to replace.
Have the structure. Yeah,
so that
sure.
It is,
yeah. That's good. So that's pretty standard. And so we'll just assume that it's all been vacated and the walls have all been removed, but the structure's still there. So you should be able to see all of the columns in the section. And so now with those blocks, we can simply draw lines from the columns on the lower level, and so I'm just projecting these from the left-hand corner. And I could have just copied the line after drawing the first one, but it's really not that much more difficult to just draw each one. So it doesn't matter how high these are, they're all going to be deleted afterwards. So I'm just going to select both of those blocks now, click copy, and then snap from the base of the column on the left-hand side, and then coming across perpendicular to each one. And so we'll need to maybe explode some of these. That's fine. Okay, so where they're overlapping, you could make a new block if you really want to, but it's probably easier just to explode the ones that need to change. So got to think a little bit about what's in front of what. So this one is in front, and then the next one to the right is behind. So, okay, so this one's hiding the one behind, so I'm going to explode the one behind. And then remove this line, that's really all we need to do there. The top's okay. And then with these two, it's the one on the right that is in front. So this one's in front, so it's hiding the one behind. So again, selecting the one behind, we'll explode that. Oh, not erase. Oops. So explode, and then again just remove the lines that aren't going to be seen. So with trim, Yeah. It's a really good exercise in drafting though, once you see things at this level.
Mine's free, but yeah.
Okay. So maybe I'll just make a start on the joists, and I'll give you some time to work on this. Or actually, no, maybe I'll let you work on it, and then I'll do the joists afterwards. Might be too much otherwise.